Hi, everybody, and welcome to today's episode of Attendance Bias. I am your host, Brian Weinstein. Today's guest is kickass bassist, singer, songwriter, bandleader, musical omnivore, and big-time Phishhead, Karina Rykman. If you've been paying attention to the jam band scene and jamband-adjacent scene for any time over the past 5 years, maybe a little bit longer than that, I imagine that you've heard of, seen the name of, or been lucky enough to hear Karina Rykman. She performs live with her guitarist and effects man, Adam November, and drummer Chris Corsico as a psychedelic bass-led power trio that will blow you away. For those of you who are on a strict Phish diet and may not be familiar with Karina, you should be aware that she has played bass on stage with Mike Gordon in several different configurations, and as of this recording, is preparing to open for him in New Orleans during Jazz Fest. In addition, she has roots with Trey Anastasio and his family going all the way back to her middle school days, and Trey co-produced her debut album, Joyride. Karina and I cover a lot of topics in today's conversation, including our experiences in New York City, her influences in terms of music and life, what it was like to record her album, and her upcoming gig at Webster Hall in New York City on Saturday, May 10th. But fear not, there are Phish references and chatter about the band sprinkled throughout the conversation. Also, it wouldn't be an attendance bias episode if the guest didn't pick out a special Phish experience, and Karina chose a doozy. October 30th, 2010, at Boardwalk Hall in Atlantic City, where Phish blew everyone's minds with a tweezer fest that weaved bits and pieces of Led Zeppelin songs throughout. But there's so much more to it than that. Let's join Karina to talk about songwriting craft, the Rocks Off boat cruise, and the best place in Manhattan for smoked salmon, as we discuss October 30th, 2010 in Atlantic City, and so much more. Karina, welcome to Attendance Bias. Thank you for being here.
It is a sincere pleasure, Brian. Thanks for having me, man. This is great.
My sincere pleasure. Back at you. We've got a whole bunch to talk about today. Your background, New York City, a little bit of Phish, but mostly your upcoming show at Webster Hall on Saturday, May 10th, 2025. I've got my ticket. I hope anyone listening, if you don't have your ticket, you should, because I'm sure they won't be available for very much longer. But we got a lot of ground to cover, Karina. You excited?
I'm super excited. Thanks. I'm ready to surrender to the flow of this podcast and this conversation, and super stoked. Yeah, man. I like all these subjects. This is all great.
Awesome. Well, taking a cue from you, we're not going to focus so much on Phish today. For those of you listening, regular attendance bias listeners, we're going to focus a bit on Karina, but fear not. Phish is never far from, I'm guessing, either of our minds. I don't want to speak for you, but they're never far from my mind. Can I say the same for you?
Never far from my mind. Never.
All right.
Yeah. So look, I'm wearing a Phish hoodie. I didn't even know. Look, you see this? You see this?
There it is. Taste the sphere. Perfect.
Taste the sphere, dude. Come on. We love it.
So for you Phish addicts out there, you will get your fill, but you got to open your ears a little bit today to hear a bit about Karina Rykman and her music. So Karina, the first thing we usually do on Attendance Bias is have a lightning round. So quick questions about yourself to hear a bit about your background. You ready?
I'm ready.
Attendance Bias Lightning Round.
All right. So Karina, you were born and raised in New York City. Between your single city kids, you refer to yourself on social media, at least, as a city kid. And I grew up on Long Island, and I usually went to Manhattan very frequently, but it was like an adventure for me. It was usually to do fun things like a Knicks game or to go to the Museum of Natural History with my family. So what is it like, if you could, growing up in Manhattan as opposed to most people who see it as a destination?
Sure. It's funny because when you grow up in it, you don't know that there's people who don't grow up that way for a long time. You know what I mean? I guess you do. I have cousins from Toronto, and it's not like I was completely sheltered, but I didn't think of it as a big deal until I started to learn the way people reacted when you tell them that you're from Manhattan. They're like, oh, what? And I'm like, oh, yeah, it's normal to me, But I guess, there's a certain level of you're exposed to so much so young, I would say. And everything here, it's what I love about it. I mean, I love quite a bit about it. How much time we got here? But I'll say that when the emphasis isn't like, you know, for most, call it suburban or whatever lifestyles, you know, it's like everybody goes and retreats to their home with their car, and this is my house and this is your house and whatever. And I don't know, I feel like here everything is just like, of course, you know, everyone lives in apartments and whatever, but that kind of forces everyone to just be out and about and on the streets. And you just, you know, we live in these, you know, small apartments for the, you know, the convenience of being around all the stuff and the culture and the, you know, I don't know, it's about the proximity to one another that you sort of are exposed to at this early age. So I don't know, back in the day, it was just like, all right, like the subway, when you're a kid, it becomes a part of your life very quickly, but you're exposed to, you know, all walks of life immediately. And, you know, I was mugged on the subway several times as a kid and like all this different stuff. But like, I don't know, you just kind of, you're exposed to humanity in a way that hits you differently, I would say, than, you know, kind of maybe anywhere. I don't know. But of course, that could be said about lots of different cities, quote unquote. But New York is so small and dense in its, or at least Manhattan is, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah, well, when I started traveling, when I was getting out of college, when I say traveling, I mean just going on big road trips with my friends to see music and go to different cities and different festivals and such. And I would talk to my cousin, who's a little bit older than me, but not too much. And I would say, I go to all these cities and I kind of expect them to be like New York, but they're not. And my cousin, who's older and wiser than me, kind of said, well, you have to remember, New York is the exception. It's not the rule. All the other cities are the rule. New York is the one that's different. And you're right. You know, I was thinking about if you're going to see like a performance when I was a little kid at Lincoln Center, and then we would take the subway down to Canal Street for dinner. It's like you're in two different countries in like a 15-minute subway ride.
Oh, and it changes like on a almost block to block level. That's how quickly things change here. And it's really a wild thing to I mean, even now, as an adult, I definitely am still like, whoa, this went from this to this so quickly. And the vibe of this block to this block is completely different. And they're 200 feet apart. You know what I mean? It's a crazy, crazy thing about how much we can just cram in. The density is just wild. It's a wild thing, you know? Now when I got older, of course, and I've never left New York City in my entire life, but, I did go from uptown to downtown. My parents are Columbia professors and I went to NYU. And, you know, in college, you know, by design, clearly you're meeting people who are not from New York City necessarily, right? And so like you start to meet people, and me just like kind of getting my toes dipped in the music scene and knowing people from all different backgrounds, walks of life, places, whatever. I learned that there's so much more similarity for people who are just from kind of a normal suburban thing, like whether you're from rural Pennsylvania or upstate New York or even Kansas or name a state, you know what I mean? Name just about anywhere that isn't, you know, New York City. And they have so much more in common than like, you know what I mean? Like I don't have like, there was no backyard for me. You know what I mean? My backyard was Riverside Park, but like, that's not, you know.
That's not your backyard.
Yeah, there's no private outdoor space. So like, you know, people were like, oh yeah, man. And we used to smash mailboxes and we used to turn the hose on at Mrs. Jenkins' house or like whatever, you know what I mean? I'm like, okay, wow. Like it, you know, we were riding our skateboards, you know, around Lincoln Center, you know, and going to the Time Warner Center and like causing trouble. And like, to me, my example of what a mall, quote unquote, was my entire life was the Time Warner Center, which for those who don't, that's the shops at Columbus Circle. Like it ain't. And then I saw a quote unquote real mall. I'm like, oh yeah, the Time Warner Center is very different from, you know, sort of just, you know, the generalized normalcy of American upbringing that people have, you know? So I don't know. It's a really interesting thing. And then, of course, it's been really interesting to see, you know, all the kids I went to school with, like, what happens to them? What happened to me? Do we like it here? Do we hate it? Like, you know, I could never, ever, 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 ever live anywhere else. But some people who I went to school with were like, the second I'm graduated, I'm never coming back, and it's a very polarizing and specific thing, which I super understand. And it's not for everybody, but it's most certainly for me. There's nothing like the rhythm and the heartbeat of this city. And to me, I don't, I'm 30 years old. I don't have a driver's license, and I never will. I'm super resigned to that fact. Like I quite literally, and I think that maybe I handicap myself in that way so that I literally can't live anywhere but New York City. You know what I mean? I'm pretty hardcore about this shit. I'm pretty hardcore. So,
well, I am too. I'll fight to the death, and more recently, because like I said earlier, I grew up on Long Island, and I have a selfish question to ask you about that. But I've more recently, 5 years ago, moved to Queens, and it's so different culturally, right? I'm only 11 miles from where I grew up. I'm not far as the crow flies, but you're right. It's so much more condensed. People have a greater tolerance for bullshit here than they generally do on Long Island in another way that people are able to put up with more before they start complaining. More tolerant, I guess, is a way to put it, of like the little irrationalities of life. You're just able to deal with it in Queens, at least. And people in Manhattan tend to see it as like, oh, it's an outer borough. But I feel like I'm part of New York City as well. Here.
You are, baby. You're 5-borough thorough. That's what we say. You're 100% 5-borough thorough. Don't let anybody tell you otherwise. No, you're right in there, man. That's great.
Well, my selfish question to ask you then, talking about how when you grew up in the city and everything is kind of shared and dense and you don't have your own backyard and stuff like that. I grew up on Long Island, so I have to ask you, when you heard the phrase or knew about Long Island, what did you think of us? Were we the posh kids? Was it, or the way I have it in my notes is, was it like the elephant graveyard in The Lion King, where it's like, oh, we don't go there?
That's a great question. I'll say I had no conception of Long Island, no predetermined conception of Long Island. But then I remember going to Jones Beach. Mm-hmm. And so I had my conception of that. And then I do remember going to the Hamptons for a bat mitzvah back in
Mazel tov.
And that was, yeah, exactly. And a girl named Sarah Silverman, literally like at our school, she got all these like coach buses to pick us up at our school and then take us to her, family's like, house in the Hamptons for this crazy, crazy elaborate bat mitzvah, which was great. And that was my first time out east. I'll never forget that. And I was like, oh, okay, so this is really fancy. We got this. We got Jones Beach, Gilgo Beach. You know about this?
Oh, I know all about Gilgo. Yeah. For a while, I thought my friend Joe was the Gilgo Beach murderer. Turns out it's not him. He's innocent.
And then I learned about the murders, and I was like, all right, we got that going on. There's definitely that. And then there was Long Beach, which in high school we definitely. I'm just giving you my points of reference.
No, that's close to where I grew up. I grew up near Long Beach.
There was that, and then the Paramount in Huntington, Long Island.
Sure.
We learned how to get there as young high school kids, so that was cool. And I learned to take the train to Cold Spring Harbor. Is that the stop?
Cold Spring Harbor. Yep.
Cold Spring Harbor is even closer, and yeah, man, I don't know. I was just like, okay, so and then I had more friends with houses out east, both on the North Fork and Stony Brook and all that type of thing, and Montauk, Amagansett, East Hampton, West Hampton, etc. So I sort of learned via beaches, to be honest. And
it
then
is an island.
Exactly. And then Fire Island became a big part of my life in early, I would say middle school through whatever. And now it still is a big part of my life. So basically, I mean, I don't know. I learned by having these destination things to go to, I guess, you know what I mean? And then going to see actually, this ties it all in. My first ever Phish show was at Jones Beach.
Oh, which one?
The third of the 3-night run in 2009 when they came back.
Oh, June 5th.
June 5th. 6509 people. 6509. So I had been to Jones Beach a couple times before that, but I was in 9th grade. So not a ton before that. Like that was like definitely one of the first shows I had seen at Jones Beach, which was very life-changing. And then a week later, I got taken to Bonnaroo by the Anastasio family, which was insane. So all of that, like, anyway, Long Island, we're wrapping it up. Long Island, my thoughts about it were I learned as we went, and I just knew that it was an island that jutted out from New York City that had all these beaches, both on, the bay side and the other side. And I wasn't like, oh, we can't go there. I was like, fuck yeah, let's go there. Sick. We got concerts, we got beaches. Like, that was basically my extent of the knowledge of the beautiful, strong island. And that's what we got.
I'm glad to hear compliments and fond memories, because when you bring up Long Island to people who grew up outside of it, you don't always hear that part. So that's real nice to hear. I grew up going to a lot of shows at Jones Beach. It was I didn't own a house. Obviously, I was a kid, but that was my hometown venue. So my dad would take me to stuff like Jethro Tull with Emerson, Lake and Palmer opening up, and I would see Dave Matthews Band there in the mid-90s and stuff like that. So I love Jones Beach very much, and I would go to the beach, like Long Beach you mentioned. I have friends who live there now. All that said, Long Island, it's good, it's great. Check it out. Anyone, when you have a chance, we love it.
Love it. To this day, I'm a big fan, big supporter. I actually went to Huntington this last weekend to see the Disco Biscuits.
They played 2 nights.
They played 2 nights. I went the second night to see my friends, the Disco Biscuits. It was wonderful. It was super fun. And actually, I hadn't been to the Paramount since not last year, but the year before. I opened for Guster there. Mm-hmm. And that was a big, kind of notable gap closer of like my show's scene at the Paramount. But I love that venue. Honestly, that venue's fucking sick. And I would go back anytime. And you know what? It's easier to get back from the Paramount in Huntington, Long Island than it is to get back from the King's Theater in deep Brooklyn.
Oh, absolutely. I saw, I think, Tedeschi Trucks at the King's Theater a couple months ago. And I'm not even that far. Man, I am very far. It takes forever.
It takes a real long time. So I was like, wow, well, we're, it's all these spread out venues here in the 5 boroughs, and you just got to figure out ways to get to all of them, to get home from all of them. It's great.
Growing up, did you do a lot of the touristy stuff in New York? Like, have you been to the roof of the Empire State Building? Did you go to the Statue of Liberty? Did you do all the stuff that, like, when family from out of town comes in and they want to do on the postcard stuff? Or were you just like, never happened? You just kind of took it for granted?
Well, that's a great question. Great question. And I have a great answer, which is that I and by great, I mean, I have a whatever answer. But my answer is that I have never, to this day, I have never been to the Statue of Liberty, ever. But I worked for a concert promotion company called Rocks Off for 8 years. And I ran boats that we would put bands on boats and send them around Manhattan for 3 hours, right? Like, that was the flagship event, was the concert cruise. And part of that was you would get real close to the Statue of Liberty, and people would definitely take photos, including myself, and blah, blah, blah. So I feel like I've been so close to it so many times, but have I ever actually gone there? No. And up until extremely recently, I had never been to the Empire State Building either. And what happened was I filmed these promo videos for Webster Hall at the top of the Empire State Building.
Right.
And that was my very first time. And it was funny. I did I actually went by myself on a site visit for that, like the week before. And I full on just bought a ticket, went to the observatory, went all the way up there, figured it out so that when me and the fellas went up to film, I would have a sense of where we were going and what was happening. But that was incredible. What a great I was like, yo, this is sick. No wonder people want to do this. This is awesome. I was like, wow, it's so great. I'm a huge fan, would totally go again. And I look forward to one day visiting the Statue of Liberty. But no, I mean, I went through a phase in middle school where I became obsessed with Times Square. And my poor mother, I remember there's one summer where I was like, Ma, we gotta go back to Times Square. There was this so rudimentary panini that I was obsessed with on this one stupid, it was nothing. But I was like, we gotta go to PAX. That was the name of the fucking deli that I like. I was like, the turkey panini, we got to get it. And then we got to go to the movie theater. And my poor mother was like, again, this is what we're doing. I'm like, come on, we got to go to Times Square. I love it there. The lights, the wax museum. I got way about it. I dropped that pretty quickly after middle school, though I did have was like a rehearsal space on 38th and 8th. So we definitely spent a lot of time in my early adolescence through, teens and early 20s in this one place on 38th and 8th that was so sketchy and seedy and fucked up and amazing, and incredible memories. So, Times Square, there was that Natural History Museum. I grew up pretty close and I went to school like 3 blocks away. So that was literally like every time my school could incorporate the Natural History Museum into some curriculum, oh baby, we were all up in there. So, I guess that counts for something.
Well, I have to thank you for working for the Rocks Off Boat Cruise, because I've seen so many great bands. I saw the new Master Sounds on the Rocks Off Boat Cruise, Pink Talking Phish. That was one of my first dates with my wife, going to see Pink Talking Phish. And one of my favorite memories of going to see the new Master Sounds was, like you just said, they take the boat right up to the Statue of Liberty. And it was during their set break. And inside, you just have to kind of look through the windows sort of to go to the Statue of Liberty. And I peeked my head right up to the window, and I didn't realize I was putting my head right between the lead guitarist, Eddie, and his girlfriend, who were like having a romantic moment, all the way from England, checking out the Statue of Liberty. And here's this doofus shoving his big noggin right in between their two faces. Like, oh, sorry, guys. Good first set.
It's so good, right? It breeds, it really breeds memories. It was a beautiful time. And honestly, I probably checked you in off the will call list for are we talking 2015? Did a whole lot.
Yeah, exactly. 2015. Yeah.
I mean, those were my prime years right there. And I remember we did so many like Pink Talking Phish, like back to like early show and a late show. And I would get there at 2 p.m. and be there till 4 a.m. And it was just complete madness in my life doing all of that. But it was great.
It was a great concept.
Yeah, it was and is. It was and is. And, shout out Jake Sufnerowski for keeping the dream alive. He's still doing it. And he's one of my dearest pals. I learned more from him than almost anybody, because that was super formative. I started when I was 18. And it went on till I was like 26 or whatever. So it was crazy times. An amazing company with an amazing vision. I loved those concert cruises.
Me too. Just as a concert goer, I love them. Totally. So we're talking about all the stuff that everybody knows: the Statue of Liberty, Ellis Island, that I consider Ellis Island, Statue of Liberty, the Empire State Building, all that, the Natural History Museum. Let's say Karina Rykman goes on a world tour with her band, Japan, Australia, all over the place, Northern Europe. You're on tour. You're pretty much the Eras Tour for Karina Rykman. You come back home to New York City. What's the first thing you got to do? First place you got to eat? First place you got to visit? What's something that not everyone might know about that you love?
Oh, you go right to Zabar's. Right to Zabar's. Of course,
yeah.
You don't even blink twice. You know what I mean? You go right. You walk into Zabar's. You kiss the ground. You say hi to all the wonderful, spectacular people who cut the fish, who have been, slicing my locks since I was in the stroller. One of my earliest memories is being pushed in the stroller, and one of these lovely gentlemen, either Ray or James, shout out Ray or James, like handing me like a strip of smoked salmon in my stroller, like to taste, and they still work there and they still are doing it. And shout out Scott Goldshine, the GM, who's now become a dear pal and is obsessed with music, hasn't missed a jazz fest in like decades. He's such a legend, and it's the greatest establishment New York City has to offer. Really, I really will take bullets for Zabar's. And it's good because I go uptown, we stop there, we get a bunch of stuff, and then I take it to my parents' house, who live very close by. So everybody's happy. That's what I do when I come back from tour, World Eras Tour. I like your style with that. That would be great.
My favorite part of the holidays is getting the Zabar's catalog in the mail. We could just go, but it's really fun to sit down and just like very slowly go through the pages and just kind of drool on this paper and be like, oh my God, if we had all the money in the world and an endless appetite, I would get this, that, and the other thing.
Exactly, exactly. And I feel bad because I'm kind of cheating on them with underneath this Taste the Sphere Phish touring crew hoodie that I'm wearing. I'm wearing a Russ and Daughters.
Oh, shoot.
So I am definitely, I'm cheating on my Upper West Side boys right now, but it's okay. It's okay. I think they understand we can all play in the same sandbox and it's all good. But
you know what? What good is faith if it's not tested every once in a while?
I like your style. I like your style.
And if you're going to test it, it better be with Russ and Daughters, because goddamn.
Listen, we can't. Yeah, I will say no further words on. We can't pick a side, but we're picking Zabars. Okay, we're picking Zabars. We're just dabbling. We're just dabbling in Russ and Daughters. Just kidding. I love Russ and Daughters as well. But Scott, if you're listening, Zabars, man. Anyway, good talk. Continue.
Let's talk a little bit about your background, your musical career. So it seems like, from what I could find, you've been playing music forever. It's been born inside of you. You formed your first band in middle school, as did I, as did a million people, although now we are in completely separate places. I was playing 5 to 1 by the Doors on the drums with a bunch of my friends who could play 3 notes. So that's kind of the extent of we went. But you formed your first band in middle school. You were at the Knitting Factory as a teen. You went to Gallatin in NYU, which is kind of like a personalized course of study, if I remember. And then you joined Marco Benevento's band toward the end of your time at NYU. Was that time when you were joining Benevento like a lightning strike moment? Because it seems like you've pursued a dream all throughout your life from the bios that I could find. Was that when you realized that something that's been a dream was now becoming a reality? Or is it just kind of like another step on the ladder for you at that point?
No, that changed everything. That literally changed my mentality towards all of this because mentality, well, let me tell you, at the time, growing up, like you said, I played in a million bands growing up and I did a million, crazy gigs, and I was in the backing band on America's Got Talent. I backed up Julia Michaels on the Today Show. I did all kinds of cool gigs. I was in 5 bands going nowhere and happy. But playing with my friends, that was our language. That was what we did. That still is. Even my friends who don't play music professionally, like what we do is music, and that's like, especially in middle and high school, we would go over to each other's apartments and just teach each other licks and listen to records and play along to records. And that was just my community. That's who I found. Nothing made sense until that. And I was very happy doing that in every way. And, but I definitely didn't see a clear future for my actual music career, if you know what I'm saying, in terms of playing it. But what I did see was a very clear path forward on the business side of things, which is what I had dug my heels into. Because, I also, from the get-go, I wanted to make money. I wanted to be around music come hell or high water. I didn't care what it meant. And that, to me, the realistic thing, which I think I was a little not delusional enough at that age. And I feel like I'm more delusional now, which is awesome. In the sense of like, I was just like, well, Karina, all these bands that you're in and like whatever, it's awesome and it's fun. But do we see you being able to make money off of this? That would be the craziest pipe dream of all time. Like, I can't imagine a world in which that would happen, But what I did was, summer between 10th and 11th grade, I interned at a management company called Vector Management. Summer between 11th and 12th grade, I interned at Relics Magazine. And then 12th grade, I started interning for Rocksoff, as we just discussed, which very quickly thereafter, I had a big salary all throughout college. I was working and got hired full time very, very quickly, and then I became the GM very, very quickly. And Jake, the founder of the company, moved to London to book the Brooklyn Bowl London. And I was here on the ground dealing with everything, booking shows, settling shows, staffing every show, like literally like really working and getting my degree at the same time and playing in 5 bands going nowhere, right? Which is all great. And I had an amazing thing going on. But in my head, you think I was thinking, oh, one of these bands is going to take off, or I'm going to like, it was the furthest thing from my mind, but I was still playing my ass off all the time and friends with lots of incredible musicians, including Dave Dreiwitz from Ween and Joyride, and you name it. He's the greatest musician and person one could ever know. Dave was a big mentor to me, and Dave was the one who changed my life. And he said, Karina, Ween is about to get back together, and I can't be in Ween and Joyride and Marco's band. Because he had, you know, in that Ween hiatus, he toured extensively with Marco, who was very, very busy at the time, you know. And so he put me up to the task of joining Marco's, or like filling in for him when he couldn't do the gigs, which I just thought was the greatest honor of my life, because I grew up respecting the ever-loving fuck out of Marco Benevento. He's one of the greatest piano players to walk this earth. Really, I do believe that. And that's not even a bold opinion. I think he's one of those. He really, so yeah, when that happened, because it's not like I didn't want that to happen. I think it's a funny thing with all that. Like, I think now I am just more emboldened to the dream. You know what I mean? And back then I was more just like trying to I was trying to get a foothold in music and working in music however I could. And the way that I had forged that path at that point was to work either for a promoter or a ticketing company or as an agent or a manager. Like, I was steeped in the music business at that point and had a lot of experience for a very young person, you know. I definitely am a natural performer. I've been, you know, as a kid, the two places I loved the most were the elevator and a taxi cab, because in an elevator you had however many captive audiences, man. I performed for every cab driver and everyone in elevators, you know, doing a little hello, my baby. Hello, my baby. I don't know what I was doing, either telling jokes or singing songs or being, you know, ridiculous. So anyway, this is my long-winded way of saying, yes, when the Marco gig came, everything changed. And it just, even at that age, I was very young, but I was a sick instrumentalist. Like, I was definitely like out there playing the bass and guitar at the time in various bands, being dope, but that shined a light on Karina the instrumentalist, you know, and everything. There was plenty of press, and then this happened, and then that happened, and next thing you know, you're going to London to open for Wolfpack, and you're going to Japan to play festivals, and you're, you know, headlining crazy shows across the US, and just Marco being this incredible beacon of joy and light and musicality. I learn more from Marco every time I get on stage with him than I could ever even tell him, you know what I mean? And it's one of those things that just like completely changed everything. And it changed my conception of myself, for sure.
I wanted to ask about that, your conception of yourself, because you said something really interesting earlier, that when you were looking back at your younger self compared to now, that you said that you're more delusional now than you were then, that you thought you were. Is it that when you say delusions, are you talking about dreams, like the scope of what you've achieved so far? Now, maybe there will be a Karina Rykman Eras tour. Like, is that what we're talking about? Like, is that how your delusions have gotten bigger? That as you've gotten more successful, your dreams have become larger?
You could definitely say that. I think it's less about kind of what I'm trying to get at when I say that is more of like I used to be very kind of more, I don't want to say practical or practically minded or whatever. I was just like, you know, I feel like the universe and just people and my fans and people in this world that I respect so much, I've gotten to this point where it's like, you'd have to be an idiot to not believe them when they tell you that you have something special, you know, and that you are this thing, this beacon of light and energy or whatever I am, you know, and it took a lot for me. And so, okay, so here's this gap, right? The gap is you join Marco Benevento's band as an instrumentalist, right? But then where and when does Karina Rykman start writing her own songs? It takes a few years there, you know what I mean? And I definitely had this kind of intrinsic fear of putting stuff out under my own name, because I have an insatiable desire to be liked by everyone or something or whatever. Like there was something there where I was like, well, the second you commit to putting something out for the world to judge, you're putting something out for the world to judge, you know what I mean? And for me personally, music is the most universal thing. It's because I love just about all music. I love the heaviest of heavy metal. I love the somberest of all singer-songwriters. I love the most esoteric of jazz, the most down the middle pop, the most, to me, this is what I can communicate with just about anybody on their music preferences because I have wide ears, but people don't always feel the same way I do about music, So like when I put out Plants, the 5-minute long instrumental in 2019, I was in that moment committing to that vibe as the Karina Rykman vibe for that one single, right? But then I, of course, subverted the shit out of that with the next single, which is a 3-minute long pop tune where I'm like, frequent flyer, going up, elevator, So like all of a sudden I'm trying to subvert my own conventions through my own music, which is fascinating and bizarre.
And they would appear on Joyride. They would appear on your debut album, those songs.
Those two songs did. Those two songs are the ones that made it from all the prior singles that had been released. And I just felt like they deserved a spot on that record, for different reasons, which I'm happy to get into.
Well, I'm excited. I do want to talk about Joyride a little bit, if you don't mind.
Of course.
So your debut album, Joyride, it was released in 2023. And as we've gone over, you obviously weren't, quote, new to the scene, right? And you also you called yourself Six Single Rykman, right? You had a couple singles.
Yep.
So, and you were all over the festival circuit, by the way. Your name, first of all, in type, your name looks great on a poster, right? It's easy to remember. It catches the attention. And you had already opened, you mentioned for Guster, also Khruangbin. So I guess this is my long way of saying, as a teacher, to use my teacher speak, that you had a lot of credits already. You kind of came onto the game with a lot of credits. And I wanted to ask, the way I think about Joyride is the whole premise of a studio recording in the 2020s. Do you feel like the approach to recording an album is different in a time now where we live, when artists are encouraged to constantly release new music for streaming services and social media, as opposed to a more traditional centralized format of music for purchase, like an album would be?
I mean, certainly. It's everything's changed in that regard, for sure. I think there's now no right or wrong way to do it, and people are having great success doing things in super novel ways, including never releasing an album and just putting singles. There's so many artists out there that just do that and have extreme success doing it, To me, Joyride, I mean, and we can talk about Trey and his sort of involvement in all this, but Trey, said to me at the Peach Festival in 2021, he was just like, we listen to your singles all the time, me and Sue around the house, and City Kids is always on, it's so awesome, it's so you, and blah, blah, blah. He was just like being super complimentary. And then he was like, but you need an album. And I said, I'm working on one. And it's true. And at that moment, like you say, I had all these, everything that had happened before was just like, I was kind of shocked, you know what I mean? Like, and that's, I was like, wait, why am I opening for Khruangbin when I don't have a song to my name? And how am I opening for Guster? And how are we booked on all these festivals? And why, it was at the time, and I'm so grateful, like the goodwill of my name to the people, I guess. Or it was just like, okay, when Karina Rykman plays, we know her from Marco, we know her from these super jams or whatever I was up to, before I started releasing my own music for people to base their opinion of me on or whatever. I was an instrumentalist that one would want to see, I guess, you know what I mean? And one would want to have open their show, theoretically. And I only say that because that's what was happening, and it was interesting. And then I had those 6 singles to my name, and we played Bonnaroo. We played Red Rocks opening for the String Dusters. Like, all these crazy ass things were happening without an album to my name. And I just knew that I wanted to, like, I love the album format so much, and it means a lot to me as call me an old soul or just a Luddite or a whatever, like somebody who just appreciates that art form. You know, I collect vinyl like my plane's going down. Like, I like the long form. And I have total respect for people who do it in other ways. It's all good. Like, to me, it's completely up to the artist at this point. But after I had that talk with Trey, I did close the floodgates, you know, and I was like, okay, no more singles. Like, we are going to get the strongest 9 songs that I have, you know, and put them on this record and like have like a real album. And that's what Joyride was. And Joyride, actually, the song was the last song written for that record, which is fascinating, because the second that I knew, like, I had the line, take me on a joyride, and like the idea Joyride in notebooks dating back to 2019. You know what I mean? Like, I was like, I knew I wanted a song by that name, and it was very emblematic of my whole being, you know. And that's rare when you find a line like that you were just like, like, we're holding on to this and we just need music to match it, and it's gonna find a place at some point. And then it did. And then I thought, oh shit, like, this is a real song. Like, you don't have to be on 12 hits of acid to listen to this song at all. Like, this is, you know what I mean? And that's a crazy feeling, like, you know, like, because in our scene, it's like there's the emphasis on songwriting in the jam sphere is not a big one, you know what I mean? And it's like, I don't know. I felt like
I can tell you, you could also be driving home on the Grand Central Parkway after a day of teaching 12-year-olds and listening to it and enjoying it too. It doesn't have to be on 12 hits of acid.
Yeah, you see, no, that's what I'm saying. You don't have to, like, it's a song that can be understood by regular laymen who listen to whatever, you know what I mean? Like, in my head, you know, when I hear that song. So I was super proud of it for that and other reasons. And yeah, then I was just like, well, the album's got to be called Joyride. It's a joyride. That's the whole thing. And that's it. And I wanted to capture those years of, and it's funny because now I'm in writing mode for album 2 in a big way. And it's like, I don't even know how to put this into words, except what I'm trying to say is that Joyride and those years kind of, you know, I had never written a song prior to 2019, you know? So that was my first year. And then boom, what happens? Pandemic, right? And then you're like, okay, we're a little bit restricted in these ways, and you can't get in a studio, and Gabe, my producer, everybody's feeling each other out and trying to work together in these ways, but like trying to, you know, it was a slow burn for a minute there. We forget, you know? And the way in which I was writing in those years, call it 2020, 2021, even into 2022, because the song Joyride was written in 2022 for sure. It was all self-motivated, and in this way that there wasn't a label, there wasn't a manager who was like, you got to do this, you got it. Like, it was just purely like one song at a time, genreless, you know what I mean? Not with nothing to compare it to except for the last singles. And each one of those singles is completely different from the last one. You know what I mean? Some are instrumentals, some are pop songs, some are heavy, some are funky, some are, you know, like LCD Sound System, Talking Heads vibe, you know, and all those things, you know. And it's just interesting as I stand before you today, you know, working on album 2. Now I feel like I have album 1 to compare it to, clearly, which is a normal, you know, I'm obviously not telling you anything that you don't know, but there's a underlying pressure that's different, and also a pressure like from the outside, just to like be like, kind of like you say, like, okay, well, we gotta follow this up. Like, we gotta do, what's the next thing? Like, what's the vibe here? Is it like Joyride? Is it not like Joyride? Is it too much? Is it too, like, you know, all these things that cross my mind on the daily. It's a really interesting process. And I'm just, all I'm saying is like the genesis of how my first record came to be, and Trey's involvement, and Gabe, and my band, and all the collaborators, and Bryce Gogg, and everybody who worked on it. It was just such an organic, slow burn of tunes trickling out when they needed to, you know what I mean? And just being like, here we go. We're here to catch these tunes. We're here to capture them the way we want to. And I don't know, it was just like the gift of endless time is all I'm saying. It was the gift of no comparisons to prior work, really.
Do you feel like you might prefer that compared to now where you're being exposed to wider and wider audiences, where you're playing, you're opening for My Morning Jacket and you're joining them for their big, I think it's in Miami, right? Their one big holiday event. You're going to be at Jazz Fest in about 2 months, right? With Mike Gordon. So you're being exposed to these very wide audiences, which is inherently a good thing. But do you think you like it better when there's fewer expectations or less pressure on yourself to match anything that came previously?
It's not a matter of liking it more. It's more of just a real mental battle that you have to have every day with yourself, where you say, Karina, don't fucking think about that. You're not thinking about that. You're thinking about making the dopest shit that you like for you. You know what I mean? Like you have to just kind of subvert your own self-conscious thing about it. Because that's the thing, like, all what you're saying is true. All of this is inherently a good thing. Because what do you want? To be able to play music in the way you want to do it for as long as possible, right? That's what I want. That's what Karina Rykman wants. It's not accolades. It's not, oh, now I sell 10,000 tickets. It's not about that sort of thing. It's just doing exactly as I please musically for a long time as my life. You know what I mean?
Dream.
It's a life's work. You know what I mean? So it's just about shutting off that all the things, the exterior noise and the interior noise of your own brain that tells you need to be doing something differently, or you need to be doing this, or you need to be doing that. It's like, no, your internal compass knows exactly what you want to make, Right.
And that could be extended to anybody at any work who needs to just clear their mind, right? That's the Buddha, right? That's the goal of enlightenment, is to quiet your mind and just be happy with what you're doing, or at least be comfortable with what you're doing.
In a big way. Yeah, exactly. It can be extended to quite literally anything. Yeah. And also it's like, and even interpersonally with people, and you're like, the whole, you've set expectations for yourself in any way, like, you know what I mean, for yourself, and others have expectations of you, and you just have to be like, okay, I show up every day doing exactly the best that I can in these I don't know, there's a lot of metaphors for life in doing this type of work. Creative work is complicated though, and that's the thing, and that's harkening back to the delusional comment, is that now knowing, like, and it's taking getting used to, you know what I mean? It's like, what do I have to do? What's the most important thing for Karina Rykman to do? Is to come up with these melodies and words and put them down. Like, it's a really weird feeling sometimes when you're just like surrounded by, also, I will say, in New York City, you're surrounded by big business and hedge fund shit and marketing executives and advertise, like, you know what I mean? And everybody is so business minded so much of the time. And I'm not saying I'm not business minded. I think I'm business minded to a fault, but like, that's the thing, to keep doing this creative work, you kind of have to just be like, all right, fuck all that. We're not even thinking about any of that right now. I'm trying to make something cool, and I want to capture a vibe and decorate time for this 3.5 minute, 4.5 minute, whatever it is, studio recording. Like, that's my work at hand. It's an interesting thing where you have to kind of be not childish, but like childlike, and be like, all right, we're dreaming big. We're willing. It's the last magic that's left in the world.
Yeah, your imagination.
We're trying to create something from nothing. It's really fascinating work,
Well, speaking of those melodies and rhythms and lyrics that you've been trying to put down, I think it's pretty cliche to say that a band or a music artist, quote, defies classification, or use the phrase genreless. It's true, but I was trying to think of a different way to ask you, oh, so what's your music like? So here's what I came up with. All right, see if you can, if this is all right, or tell me to go fuck myself if you don't like this little game. So,
I like it.
I've been listening to Joyride and your singles and your live show from Racket last year, NYC, for over a year. I'm sold, right? So I've been trying to think, what do I hear in terms of influences? So for anyone listening to this episode of Attendance Bias who doesn't know the music of Karina Rykman, here are some influences that I've heard. You tell me, am I hot? Am I cold? Am I somewhere in the middle? You let me know if I'm somewhat on track.
I love this game. Love it already. Love it.
And tell me how cold I am if I am cold, okay? And this is good. All right, this might even say more about my listening habits than anything you actually sound like. But anyway, hearing you live, all of your live music, I hear John Entwistle all over the place.
Hot. Definitely hot. Definitely hot. Not, hot for sure. Not like my blueprint, but hot for sure. Yes. Big fan since forever. One of my idols. Yes. Hot.
Right. And I don't even mean to suggest that Karina Rykman's band sounds like The Who. That's not what I'm saying. But the energy that you put forth and the agility you have on the bass speaks to me as influenced by John Entwistle in that sense, in terms of essence, if not actual sound.
I like that a lot.
Okay, cool. All right. Next up, this is mostly based on the album Radiohead. And I actually thought about Adam, your guitarist / musician who's on stage with you. Sound reminded me a lot of Johnny Greenwood.
Very hot, piping hot, piping hot. Yes, no, in a big way. And even Adam we should have a whole separate podcast about Adam, but he is a sound design wizard in every shape of and stretch of the word. And he is just, a brilliant player and a brilliant effectsman, and there's definitely, Adam is so deep in the Johnny Greenwood forums that, he has this mini glitch pedal that, Johnny Greenwood, it's, an emulator of a Johnny Greenwood effect that blah, 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 very nerdy, very dope. Yes, I'm a Radiohead junkie in all forms, and it's like, how do you make Radiohead sounding music without sounding like, fucking depressed Tom York, it's really interesting. But I'm figuring it out. I'm taking that's the thing. Like you say, we take a little John Entwistle, a little Johnny Greenwood, and then we're cooking with gas, It's great.
I had a couple more because
please.
This is an ongoing melange. So
I'm loving it.
I never thought I would say this about the bass playing in the same song. But in Skylark / Slowlark, is that how you say it when you refer to, or is it just Skylark?
Skylark, Slowlark, whatever,
okay.
Yeah, either way. You could call it Skylark.
All right. So Skylark, Slowlark, I hear hints of both Paul McCartney and Bootsy Collins in the same song.
I literally couldn't love you more. I would leap through this computer and give you a hug. Yeah, no, that's good. That's good. So much
your playfulness on the high register of the bass, especially in the first chunk of the song. To me, I'm like, oh, this doesn't sound like a Beatles song really at all, but this sounds like Paul McCartney is having fun. This sounds like the joyfulness in his playing. And then the back end, which I guess is the Slowlark part,
baby.
that's all funk. And the effects on it, the processing of it, I'm like, it's Bootsy, baby, It's
Bootsy, baby. You got that right. No, that's great. I mean, honestly, there's so many movements in that song, and each movement sort of has, like, I could literally go down the line and be like, okay, well, the beginning was direct Wolfpack inspired, and then there's this one part that reminds me of this Government Mule song, and then there's this other part that reminds me honestly of Mike Gordon, and there's this like klezmer-y crazy part that leads out of the jam that's insane. And then of course the end is just straight Bootsy, George Porter, but affected and with a deep impact on it, which is all Mike and and a lot of other things. But yes, thank you. And that song is fucking crazy.
I love it.
Thank you.
and Plants, the version that's on Joyride. Okay, so the revamped version, I suppose we could call it. I hear Roger Waters all over it in terms of bass playing. the high, the do do do, like it's almost like I'm listening to the best parts of Dark Side of the Moon in terms of the isolated bass.
Wow. That is so fucking cool. I literally
Is it hot
love
or
that.
cold though? Like, were you thinking that at all?
For that tune
Yeah.
specifically? No, I was
Okay.
not. That tune to me, that was the first one, and that one was really Rat-a-tat meets Krungbin in my head at that point, and that, but that's not to say that Roger Waters and Pink Floyd is, top 5 influences in my life, like my top 5 favorite bands, top 5, like I don't even know how to properly praise Pink Floyd to you. So in that regard, you're incessantly hot, you know what I mean? But for that specific tune, it was more just like F sharp minor, crawling bass line, super sexy, whatever. And writing that tune was crazy. Writing that tune was really crazy. And that was the first, like that melody. No. I was just like, and it's funny. I tried, it was my first song, right? I am, we say I had a lot of, experience and accolades at the time and whatever, which is true. Like I had been touring for years with Marco at that point, and I had been touring in general for years and playing in bands and blah, blah, blah. But like, I wanted to put lyrics to that melody and couldn't figure it out. And I was like, you know what? Fuck that. It's instrumental. And that's why Plants is an instrumental. Yeah, that's great though. I like the specificity here. Keep them coming. What else you got?
I've got 2 left. One
Sick.
also is Larry Graham of Graham Central Station.
Oh yeah.
Just in Your Funk. I forget. Oh my God, I'm having a blank spot. It's one of the songs. I don't think it's toward the beginning of the album where you skip the first beat and do 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 do. You know what? I'm making an ass of myself.
Is it Fever Dream? Is it Fever Dream?
Yes, it's Fever Dream.
That's
it. I hear Graham Central Station, not in the whole song, but I tried to zoom in because I listened to your album. I have a 35-minute commute home from work, and your album like slides right into there. It's like 29 minutes or something like that, and it just hits that sweet spot. So I've been listening to it a lot, and I don't know. I hear Graham Central Station a lot, and then, of course, I don't mean to sound like it's taken for granted, but Phil Lesh, specifically in your fearlessness of playing on the high end of the register before dropping a bass bomb that can vibrate the chests of anyone in the audience or just my Subaru speakers. And that's what I hear, the kind of emphasizing the low end by also playing on the high end first. So it's like a study in contrasts, but it's visceral when you hit that low end. And that reminds me of hearing Phil Lesh play, where he would start on the low end, but then skip to the high end to kind of like take away that intensity and get people more comfortable with the bass before boom, just like totally shocking the system.
Dropping the Phil bomb. Yeah. No, I mean, cannot yet again, cannot be overstated what kind of an influence his specific playing is on mine in that regard. And also just in the, when you're looking at people playing basses with picks, right? It's a very jam band thing to do. And we have Mike and Phil and Dave Schools and lots of people who do this, but Phil did it in such a compelling way and in a way that subverted so many of the rules of traditional rock, funk, pop bass playing. You know what I mean? Call it what you will, but the way in which Phil played almost these like, call them through composed classical, like, incredible bass lines in which nothing ever repeated, and he never hit it on the one, and he like did all it was really, it's an amazing thing going back and listening to Phil and seeing just how out of the box his playing was, and how inventive and just, I don't know, to me, his playing is just a great example of just like, you have your own style, you fucking go for your own style. Like, you know what I mean? And of course, our styles are an amalgamation of our influences and the things that we've listened to and our proclivities and whatever, you know, where the hands lie when you touch the instrument. But Phil is a great example of just like, people weren't doing it like that. He invented a whole thing that people have been hopelessly and helplessly trying to replicate and unable to do so because there can only be one, you know?
I think Jerry Garcia said about him, he plays the bass as if he invented the instrument.
Yeah.
Like, as if no one had ever picked up a bass before he did. Like,
yeah, to me,
he looks at it completely differently than anyone else.
Certainly. I would say that Phil's not even a bass player. He's a painter. I don't even know. He's like the Picasso of bass, like, you know, speaking of Picasso Moon, baby, but you know, it's a real thing for sure. And going back to Graham Central Station, you know, Larry Graham is the GOAT of slap bass, if you ask me. So there is no, when I play slap bass, which I do sometimes, and I do it poorly, because that was never a thing that I tried to develop, like just a little bit of flashy embellishments and like, you know, stuff here and there, but it's definitely not my thing. And I would never purport to it being my thing, even though I very much enjoy it. And I love listening to Flea and Les Claypool and Larry Graham and so many others do it, you know, but whenever I do it, yes, Larry Graham is very much on my mind. Though I will say Fever Dream has no slap bass in it. So
it wasn't even slap. It was the do. It was the tightness of the
tightness of it. No, I love that you think that. I wasn't thinking in that direction. That tune was originally correlated in my mind to it's a total modern reference, Heat Waves by Glass Animals, and then had, you know, the band Air.
I don't think so, because my head unfortunately went to Air Supply.
No, that's great. Yeah, no, very different. No, not Air Supply, but there's a French band called Air. Very, very cool. I feel like Fever Dream, just the genesis of it was sort of like a Glass Animals meets Air vibe. And I don't know where it ended up, but that's definitely what you know, what I was going for in the beginning.
Well, I appreciate it. I wanted to wrap up this segment, not because I'm throwing all these bass players at you, throwing back at the listening audience. Who's a bass player that might not be readily clear in your playing as an influence, but if we wanted to unlock a little bit more of what inspired Karina or inspires Karina Rykman, what's a bass player? Who's a bass player we should listen to, living or dead?
I mean, Dave Dreiwitz, because Dave Dreiwitz from Ween not only completely shaped me as a young person interpersonally and like jamming with me and being a mentor to me and all these things, but when you listen to Ween and you listen, and of course, you know, now he's making waves with Joyride all around and doing all these other incredible things, and he's the bass player that is so good. He fits the vibe of whatever he's playing always. And that's why Ween is the most eclectic band I can think of, right? They can make you laugh. They'll make you cry. They'll play heavy metal. They'll play lounge music and avant-garde jazz. Like all their songs are different, right? To an extreme degree. And that's why when you watch Dave play with Ween, you're seeing a person who in a single night is going from genre to genre to genre in a way that is extraordinarily compelling to me and effortless to watch. When you watch him doing it, you're just like, you're not even, you know, it's like the bass is another limb for this guy. So Dave on every level, and on the human level, it cannot be overstated how wonderful of a human this guy is, and just how much he's given me, both, you know, on and off the stage. It's just a crazy, crazy thing.
Well, in terms of eclectic bands and other bands, this is Attendance Bias is obstinately a Phish podcast. So we know you're a big fan. You've touched on your interactions with Trey, and certainly he's a big part of your music development professionally, and I would imagine personally as well. When you and I were going back and forth about the premise of this show, about picking a show that meant something important to the guest, we didn't want to make this whole episode about Phish. Obviously, you are your own musician, very talented, and hopefully, well, you are well known and will become more well known. But the first show that you brought up was October 30th, 2010, at Boardwalk Hall in Atlantic City. And this was the second of 3 nights of the 2010 Halloween run. When the band came back the previous year in 2009, they played all of Exile on Main Street, right? The seminal Rolling Stones album, at least in my opinion, at Festival 8. It was almost like dream fulfillment for lots of fans, but it was also odd, at least in my opinion at the time, because it was a Halloween festival in California, none of which had ever been done before. So the hype for Halloween in 2010 was just out of control. It was back on the East Coast. It was in Atlantic City, which is a party town for a lot of fans. And the rumors flying around that year was Phish was going to cover a Led Zeppelin album. Those rumors come around every year, but they intensified tenfold when people said they heard the band sound checking Whole Lotta Love in the afternoon on October 30th. So before we get into the show, just a little bit, and we won't go song for song, just I'm guessing the main chunks, but who were you at this time that brought you to Atlantic City in 2010 for Phish? Halloween or just the show pre-Halloween?
I was at all of the shows. I was 16 years old. I was with my best friends, who, we still see Phish shows together to this day. Isaac and Josh and Matt. And we had our friend Big Josh check us into the Borgata because we were too young to check into a hotel room by ourselves, So like, it was that level of like, we are the kids here. I'd never been to a casino like properly, I felt like it was perfect for attendance bias because talk about like all the external things that made this the greatest time in my life. Like, it was just so memorable beyond just the show, and the show itself is fucking incredible, right? Yeah. But I was, with my 3 16-year-old best friends, all staying in the same hotel room, of course, and going day in and day out to Boardwalk Hall to see these concerts. And yeah, it was I had never seen a Phish Halloween, and this was a first in that regard. At this stage in the game, I'm obsessed with Phish in this, like, really, 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 I could play you so much of the stuff on guitar, so much of the stuff on bass. Me and my friends cover the stuff. Like, we're just like, my Phish nerd, it's at an all-time high, and just having discovered the band the year before. So we're there, and we were present in the arena for the Whole Lot of Love sound check. So I didn't even know, just because, like, I didn't know what to read. Like, I don't know. Like, or maybe Isaac did. Like, Isaac was definitely, like, the most dialed in, and is the most dialed in with what's happening on the Phish nerd level, and he reads all the forums and PT and whatever. He's, like, really got his finger on the pulse. So, we're all thinking they're going to cover a Zeppelin album just like everybody else is, right? And then we're in the arena, and it's just like, they played a Whole Lot of Love, for sound check, and it was just like, oh, they're doing it. They're really doing it. And we're young and dumb, and we don't know what's going on. It was so exciting, and just the whole thing. And I believe that first night was the night that they played Karina and Karini.
Yes.
Is that accurate?
Yes.
And I'll never forget going backstage at set break with me and my 3 friends, right? And like running into Trey and just being like, Karina and Karini. And he was like, yeah, that was for you. And I was like, oh, you're lying. He was like, no, I'm not lying. Like, whatever. And I who's to know if that was true or not, but it definitely meant the world to me. And I was like, holy shit.
Just so you know, you're blushing right now as you tell this story.
I mean, that's a crazy thing that he said to me. How crazy is that? So I don't know, just the vibe of being in Atlantic City and all this stuff happening. And then, on the 30th, here we go. There's this monster tweezer, and the tweezer keeps going with these Zeppelin teases. You've heard the story. You know what we're talking about. And it blew my 16-year-old brain right off its axis. And I was just like, oh my God. And now it's Heartbreaker. And now, like all of it, it was just so insane. But then, of course, that was happening the day before Halloween. I learned about Ha Ha Ha, which was fun. I didn't know. That was great. And I was like, what's this? And Isaac was like, ha ha ha, they're, and whatever, just like little stupid things like that you find out about. And, yeah. And I remember that next night talking to Sue Anastasio, Trey's wife, like at catering, and just being like, so what's it going to be? Like, what is it? It's not Zeppelin, right? Or is it? Like, blah, 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 like whatever. And I remember her saying something to the effect of, I don't even know if you guys will know this record. And I remember not being offended, but I was like, well, I know everything about music.
Well, you're 16. Of course you know everything.
I was kind of like, what do you mean? We are so well-versed in the history of modern rock music. Like, I can't imagine. And then all bullshit aside, she was, for me, absolutely right. I had no conception of Waiting for Columbus.
Isn't it such a joy though? Like when I was in college, I was in a band. I play the drums. I'm a recovering drummer. And nice. One guy, the bass player, actually, his name is John, but we called him Critic for a million reasons. But Critic suggested that we play Willin' on like the open mic night. I went to college in Buffalo, where it's like a bunch of drunk 18-year-olds screaming for who knows what. And we're playing this slow classic rock country ballad, But isn't it such a joy when you learn a new song or hear a new song, or in this case, a whole double live album by a band that when you open the door, there's an entire world waiting for you to step in and learn?
Oh, I cannot thank them enough for bringing Little Feat into my life. Like, are you kidding? I couldn't agree more. It was so eye-opening. And then, of course, I had to know everything about Little Feat, and I had to go way down. I was like, oh, how could I not know something that's, like, that's ridiculous. Because, of course, at the time, and maybe still now, the only thing that we thought was cool to know about was shit like this. You know what I mean? Like, we had to know everything about rock music from 1955 to the present, and I didn't know shit about Little Feat, I'll admit it. And yeah, no, what an absolute pleasure. And then was it the next summer or the following? I feel like it was 2011. They played Skin It Back at Jones Beach as
2012.
2012. There you go. Okay. I remember Skin It Back from Jones Beach and just being so, because they also did Happiness is a Warm Gun that night.
That was July 3rd and 4th, 2012. Yeah. I was at those shows. That was it.
Those shows, I just remember just being like overjoyed to hear Skin It Back for whatever, like, better than anybody, the sun is setting.
Such a beautiful
vibe
night.
Is right, and then it just hit right place, right time, right set, right setting. Everything about it was perfect. And I was just like, yes, there was something so right about that song in that moment for whatever reason. And yeah, I couldn't agree more. Learning about Little Feat there changed everything for me in a serious way. And walking out of 10:30:10, I remember the scream, like in the halls, of Boardwalk Hall. Like, the concert was over. We were all walking out into the Atlantic City, Boardwalk, and people were losing their shit, just screaming. And it just kept amplifying. And I was like, wow, like, this is the power of live music. Like, this is, and I know that feeling, and I know it well, and I've experienced it many times since, but that was a very, very special show that everybody was just like ready to, I don't know. I knew from that moment on kind of that I would hearken that as my favorite concert I've ever seen. Yeah, you know what I mean? And it kind of has remained that. It's a special moment in time that can't be replicated, with the rumors flying and the Zeppelin and the we're giving it to you a day early, bitches, ha ha ha, like, or whatever. Like, I don't know. The whole thing was so self-referential and in on it. So, like, you know what I mean? Like, it was really cool. So yes.
I know exactly what you mean. I remember grabbing, and I apologize if through Amazing Phish serendipity you are listening to this right now, but I remember grabbing a stranger next to me. I was there with my then girlfriend, and I mean, we're freaking out. You just said it better than I could, but just freaking out as they kind of weave this Tweezer Fest in and out of different Led Zeppelin songs. And then they actually go for it. They decide to close it with Stairway to Heaven, like the Led Zeppelin song, right? The one that you're not allowed to play in guitar shops, from the Wayne's World joke. And I remember screaming, grabbing someone by the shoulders and screaming, Phish is playing Stairway to Heaven. We should acknowledge this. We should know this. And I didn't even know what I was saying. The words were coming out backwards. And Just the fact that we could say we saw Phish play Stairway to Heaven, goofy though it may sound on the re-listen, in the moment, like you just said, your nervous system was coming out of your skin. Like there's no better way. It is a seminal moment, I would imagine, for almost anyone who was there. You said
in such a big way. In such a big way. You know, we're not worthy. We're not worthy. And they continue to create these moments for us. It's really like to be alive in the time of this band operating at such a high level and keeping on trying to outdo themselves with each step of the way in their fucking 60s. Like, let's go. You know what I mean? Like, that's just like Phish will never be a nostalgia act as long as, you know, you got these, it's what they are doing to keep this train fresh and rolling and so compelling. And I don't know, I'm awed by it every day. I really can't believe that, you know, those are my friends, mentors, my favorite band, a band I've seen now 155 times. Like, it's just it's madness. It's just madness. Like, unbelievable that we get to partake in this stuff. It really is.
And speaking of seminal moments of live music, you are playing Webster Hall in New York City on Saturday, May 10th. The last time I saw you play in New York City was at Racket NYC, which is a smaller club. When I say smaller, it's got a capacity of 650, according to the website, near Chelsea Market. So when you're playing Webster Hall on May 10th, according to their website, they have like 3 different rooms, right? They have, I think it's called the Marlin Room. They have the studio. And
Not anymore.
Oh, is that right?
Those have all been done away with since the renovation. Now it's just the Grand Ballroom. Now it's just the big boy. Yep.
So it has a capacity of 1,500.
1,300.
1,300. All right. I'm glad you're here to correct me. And because I usually do a fact check at the end of the episode. So what did it feel like when that booking was locked in from you're pretty much doubling your previous New York City crowd?
It's madness. It was madness. And I remember, you know, Racket sold out in a day, you know, and it was just like, oh, and then like, what, you know, and if you sell out Racket in a day, you go to Webster Hall if you continue on with the Bowery Presents, which I am going to until the day I die. And so, you know, that was the next venue up. And yeah, we got the offer very quickly thereafter. You know, that show was booked like almost a year out. If not over a year out, you know, so that just felt crazy just based on the performance of Racket that this would be. I never thought I would be in a band that could play Webster Hall. I've never played, you know, what's crazy, Brian, is that I've never even played one note of music at Webster Hall. And I've played 7.5 minutes of music at Madison Square Garden with Phish during sound check. And I've played, you know, I've played several notes on stage at Radio City and like in so many other, like, you know, but Webster Hall has escaped me. And it's just like has this sort of insane lore about it in my mind. And I don't know, I saw Metallica do an underplay there. I saw Soundgarden there. I saw 9 Inch Nails there. I have seen some of my favorite artists of all time play these underplays there. And, you know, also bands that are appropriately sized and whatever, but still, like, I don't know. It just, it boggles the mind. I never have even opened for a band there. So this is a wild, exciting time. And I'm just, you know, we got some tricks up our sleeve and we're not going to be afraid to use them. And it's going to be really fucking fun. And I don't know, just to have, I don't know, for me, a hometown show like this, it's just like all my grade school teachers are hitting me up and like my doormen from growing up, like it's just such a beautiful thing of just everybody that you've ever known in this highly densely populated city, you know, hearkening back to the beginning of the podcast. And yeah, man, I'm fucking stoked is the point.
I'm fucking stoked too. And, you know, and in however many years someone will be able to brag, they saw Karina Rykman at Webster Hall. So those of you listening, Webster Hall, by the way, it's not just legendary in Karina's mind. It has been there since 1886. There are these beautiful sconces, these light sconces right outside this amazing old-time view. So when you're there, you're in New York. To bring it back to the beginning of our conversation, like you said, if you haven't yet, go to KarinaRykman.com or WebsterHall.com. Get your tickets. The show is on May 10th, Saturday night. I'm sure it's going to be more difficult as it gets closer to get those tickets. So if you hear this and you're interested, go check them out. Get tickets for Karina Rykman Saturday, May 10th at Webster Hall. Karina, 1,000,000,001 thanks for taking the time to come on here and talk everything with me. I appreciate it so much.
Oh, Brian, it was such a delight. Thank you so much for having me. And man, I can't wait to see you at Webster Hall, if not before.
And that's it for today's episode. I'd like to thank Karina Rykman again for joining me today. Again, her gig at Webster Hall is on Saturday, May 10th, and you can get tickets at KarinaRykman.com and at WebsterHall.com. There's no fact check today because 95% of the episode was Karina telling her own life story, and who would I be to make any corrections? If you enjoy Attendance Bias, please support the show by visiting www.buymeacoffee.com/attendancebias and donating anything you can. You can also reach out to Attendance Bias on social media. Thanks again so much for listening, and I'll see you next time on Attendance Bias.